I, 35M, never thought I'd be pouring my heart out on Reddit, but here I am, feeling lost and seeking advice from strangers on the internet. It's a long and complicated story, so please bear with me as I try to unravel the mess that has become my family life. I grew up in what I always thought was a typical middle-class family in suburban America. My sister, 32 farads, is 3 years younger than me, and for the first decade of our lives, we were inseparable. Our parents encouraged us to be close, and we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. We'd spend hours building elaborate Lego cities, creating our own secret languages, and defending our backyard fort against imaginary invaders. Those early years were filled with laughter, shared secrets, and the kind of bond I thought would last a lifetime. But as we entered our teens, things began to change. At first, it was subtle, so subtle that I didn't even notice it happening. My sister started showing a different side of herself, one that was incredibly competitive, not just with me, but for our parents' attention. I remember the first time I really noticed it. I was 14, and I had just made the junior varsity baseball team. I was over the moon, and my parents were planning a small celebration dinner. The morning of the dinner, my sister suddenly announced she had been chosen to represent her class in a citywide art competition. Just like that, my celebration turned into a joint event, with most of the focus on her rare opportunity. As time went on, these incidents became more frequent and more calculated. She'd suddenly develop an interest in whatever hobby our dad was into that month. If he took up golf, she'd be out practicing her swing every day. When Mom started a book club, my sister was suddenly a voracious reader, always ready to discuss the latest selection. I tried to brush it off as normal sibling rivalry, but it went beyond that. She'd schedule important events on the same days as my activities, forcing our parents to choose. Like the time she organized a charity bake sale on the day of my state championship baseball game, or when she conveniently planned a family movie night during my high school graduation party. Our parents weren't completely oblivious to this behavior. They often called her out on it, but she always had an excuse ready. "I didn't realize," or "it just worked out that way," she'd say with a perfectly innocent expression. And more often than not, they'd end up dividing their attention with one parent at each event. I could see the guilt in their eyes when they had to make these choices, but it didn't change the fact that they were being manipulated. As we entered adulthood, the competition didn't stop, it just evolved. While I pursued my passion for technology and built a career in the tech industry, my sister seemed to mold her entire life around our parents' expectations. She chose the college they preferred, even though she had been accepted to her dream school. She pursued the career they always talked about, abandoning her own interests in the process. She even dated the kind of guys they approved of, rather than the artistic types she used to be drawn to. Don't get me wrong, I love my parents. They've always supported me, even when I chose a path different from what they had in mind. They helped me move into my first apartment, celebrated my promotions, and have always been there when I needed advice. But there was always this underlying current of approval when it came to my sister. They'd never say it outright, but their pride in her choices was palpable. It was in the way they'd brag about her to their friends, the way they'd light up when she'd call with news. I tried to talk to my sister about it once, when we were both home for the holidays a few years ago. I asked her if she was really happy with the choices she was making, if this was truly the life she wanted. Her response chilled me. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This is how you win. You give them what they want, and you get what you want. It's not hard, but I guess you've never been good at playing the game." That conversation haunted me for years. It made me realize that the sister I knew, the one I'd built forts and created secret languages with, was gone. In her place was someone I barely recognized, someone who saw our family relationships as a game to be won. Fast forward to recent events. I've been dating my girlfriend, now fiancée, 33 feuds, for 5 years. We met at a tech conference, bonded over our shared love of obscure sci-fi shows, and have been inseparable ever since. She's brilliant, kind, and has been my rock through all the family drama. We've built a life together, and I finally proposed last year. It was a moment of pure joy, and I couldn't wait to share it with my family. I called my parents first, and their reaction was lukewarm at best. They congratulated me, of course, but there was a distinct lack of enthusiasm. My mom's first question was, "Have you told your sister yet?" It stung, but I brushed it off, attributing their subdued reaction to the surprise. Around the same time, my sister, who had been working abroad for a multinational company, announced that she had gotten married in a small ceremony overseas. Due to the pandemic and travel restrictions, we couldn't attend. Our parents were devastated about missing it, and I could see the guilt eating away at them. They spent hours on video calls with her, planning a belated celebration and talking about how they could make it up to her. Then, a few months ago, my sister dropped another bombshell. She was pregnant and coming back to the States for an extended visit. She and her husband, 34M, would be staying with our parents for 6 months, working remotely and preparing for the baby. At first, I was happy for her. Despite our complicated relationship, she's still my sister, and the thought of becoming an uncle was exciting. I even started looking at onesies with nerdy slogans, thinking about how I could bond with my future niece or nephew. But then things started to go downhill. As I tried to involve my parents in wedding planning, they seemed distracted and uninterested. Every conversation somehow turned back to my sister's pregnancy or her upcoming visit. I'd call to ask their opinion on venues, and they'd end up talking about how they were redecorating the guest room for my sister's stay. I tried to be understanding. They had missed her wedding, after all, but it was frustrating. I remember one particularly disheartening incident. I had finally found the perfect venue for the wedding, a beautiful lakeside resort that my fiancé and I both loved. I was on the phone with my mom, excitedly describing the place and asking if she and Dad would like to come see it with us. Her response, "Oh, honey, that sounds nice, but we're actually busy that weekend. Your sister has her first ultrasound, and we promised we'd be there via video call. You understand, right?" I did understand, but not in the way she meant. I understood that once again, my sister's life events were taking precedence over mine. I understood that even from halfway across the world, she still had the power to overshadow my moments. The real blow came last week. My sister announced she was planning her baby shower on the exact same day as my wedding. When I confronted her about it, she gave me that innocent look I knew all too well. "Oh, I didn't realize that was your wedding date," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "But you know, it's the only day that works for everyone, and I'll be heading back overseas soon after. You can change your date, right?" It's not like you've sent out invitations yet, but we had sent out invitations. We had booked the venue, hired the caterers, and put down numerous non-refundable deposits. Changing the date wasn't just inconvenient, it was practically impossible at this point. I was furious. This wasn't some high school event she could overshadow. This was my wedding day. The day my fiancé and I had been planning and dreaming about for months. I immediately called a family meeting to sort this out. The family meeting was a disaster from the start. We gathered in our parents' living room, the tension palpable. My fiancé sat beside me, her hand reassuringly on my knee. My sister and her husband were on the opposite couch, while our parents took the armchairs, looking uncomfortable. I started by explaining how important this day was to me and my fiancé, how we'd been planning for months. and how hurt we were that my sister would schedule her baby shower on the same day. I laid out all the practical reasons why we couldn't change our date: the deposits, the invitations, the out-of-town guests who had already made travel arrangements. As I spoke, I could see my sister's expression changing. The fake innocence was gone, replaced by a calculated look I knew all too well. When I finished, she launched into her counter-argument. "I understand you're upset," she began, her voice trembling slightly, a performance I'd seen many times before. "But you have to understand my position. I've missed out on so much family time being overseas. This might be my only chance to celebrate with everyone before the baby comes. And let's be honest, a baby is a much bigger deal than a wedding. You can always have another wedding, but this is my first child." I was stunned into silence by her audacity. My fiancée squeezed my hand, and I could feel her trembling with anger beside me. My sister continued, turning to our parents. "Mom, Dad, you missed my wedding. Are you really going to miss my baby shower too? Especially when it might be your only chance to celebrate with me before the baby arrives?" I looked to my parents, hoping against hope that they'd see through her manipulation. But the moment I saw their faces, I knew they were going to side with her. Again, my dad spoke first, his voice hesitant. "Son, we know your wedding is important, but your sister makes some good points. She'll be leaving soon, and who knows when we'll all be together again. Can't you reschedule? Or maybe we could come to your wedding a bit late?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own parents were asking me to reschedule my wedding or accept that they'd be late to one of the most important days of my life. The rage and hurt I felt in that moment were indescribable. My mom chimed in, her voice pleading. "We're not trying to choose sides, honey. We love you both equally. But this is about your niece or nephew too. Don't you want us to be there for the baby?" That was the last straw. Years of pent-up frustration, hurt, and anger came pouring out. "Equally?" I said, my voice shaking. "You love us equally, that's a joke, right? When have you ever treated us equally? When have you ever put my needs, my feelings first?" I stood up, my hands shaking. "So that's it. After all these years, after everything, you're still choosing her? Fine. Make your choice. But know this, if you're not at my wedding, don't expect to be part of my life afterward. I'm done. I'm done competing for your attention, for your love. I'm done being the son you think about only when she's not around." The room fell silent. My sister's triumphant smirk faded, replaced by a look of shock. My parents sat there, mouths agape, as if they couldn't believe I was standing up to them. "I'm getting married in 2 months, I continued, my voice steadier now. "You have until then to decide what's more important to you, being there for your son on the biggest day of his life, or attending yet another event orchestrated by your daughter to manipulate you. Choose wisely, because this decision will affect our relationship for the rest of our lives." With that, I stormed out, ignoring their calls. My fiancée followed, her face a mix of shock and pride. When we got home, she held me as I broke down. All those years of feeling second best, of watching my sister manipulate our parents, it all came crashing down on me. Now, a week later, I'm still standing firm on my decision. My wedding is in 2 months, and I've made it clear to my parents that their choice will have permanent consequences. They've been calling and texting, alternating between guilt-tripping and pleading, but I'm not budging. My fiancé supports me, but thinks I should leave the door open for reconciliation. Some friends think I'm overreacting, while others say it's about time I stood up for myself. I'm torn between my love for my family and my need for self-respect. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for giving my parents this ultimatum? Am I overreacting? Or is this the right thing to do? How do I move forward from here? I feel like I'm at a crossroads, and whichever path I choose, I'll be losing something valuable. But I also feel for the first time in a long time, that I'm standing up for myself and my future family. Any advice or perspective would be greatly appreciated. Update 1. It's been a whirlwind few weeks since my last post, and I felt I owed you all an update. First off, thank you to everyone who responded to my original post. Your support and advice have been invaluable during this difficult time. So, here's what's happened since then. My fiancé and I got married last Saturday. It was a beautiful ceremony, filled with love, and surrounded by friends who have become our chosen family. But I'd be lying if I said it was perfect. The absence of my parents and sister cast a shadow over what should have been the happiest day of my life. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, my parents continued their campaign of guilt-tripping and emotional manipulation. They left voicemails, sent texts, and even showed up at our apartment unannounced. Each time, their message was the same. How could you do this to the family? Why are you being so selfish? Can't you see how much this is hurting your sister? I stood my ground, but it was hard. There were moments when I almost gave in, when the weight of potentially losing my family forever felt too heavy to bear. But my fiancée, now my wife, was my rock through it all. She reminded me why we were doing this, why it was important to stand up for ourselves and our future. The day before the wedding, I received a final message from my mom. It read, "We love you, son, but we can't support this decision. We'll be at your sister's baby shower. We hope someday you'll understand and forgive us." I'd like to say I took it in stride, that I was prepared for this outcome. But the truth is, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I broke down in our hotel room, a mix of anger, hurt, and a deep, aching sadness washing over me. My wife held me as I cried, assuring me that we were starting our own family now, one built on mutual respect and unconditional love. The wedding itself was beautiful. Our friends rallied around us, filling the spaces where my family should have been. My best friend's father even offered to walk me down the aisle, a gesture that brought me to tears. As I said my vows, looking into my wife's eyes, I knew I had made the right choice. This was the family I chose, the love I deserved. Now, we're on our honeymoon in Bali. It's a paradise here, all pristine beaches and lush landscapes. It should be the most relaxing time of our lives, but I'd be lying if I said the family drama wasn't casting a shadow over our trip. Yesterday, as we were lounging by the pool, I received a lengthy text message from my sister. I was tempted to ignore it, to continue pretending my family didn't exist, at least for the duration of our honeymoon. But curiosity got the better of me. The message was, well, it was something else. Here's the gist of it. I hope you're happy now. Mom and Dad are devastated. They barely enjoyed my baby shower because they were so upset about missing your wedding. How could you be so selfish? You've ruined everything. You've torn this family apart just because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention for once. I always knew you were jealous of me, but I never thought you'd stoop this low. Don't bother coming to see the baby when it's born. You're no uncle of mine. I read the message once, twice, 3 times. Each time, I felt a different emotion surge through me. Anger at her audacity, hurt at her cruel words, a twisted sense of vindication that she had finally dropped her innocent act and shown her true colors. My wife noticed my distress and asked what was wrong. I showed her the message, and her reaction was a mix of shock and fury. She wanted to respond, to put my sister in her place once and for all, but I decided against it. Instead, I blocked my sister's number. It was a small act, but it felt like reclaiming a piece of my peace of mind. This whole situation has made me reevaluate my relationship with my family. I've spent so many years trying to win their approval, trying to measure up to my sister in their eyes. But now, I'm starting to see how toxic that dynamic was. I was never going to win that game because the rules were rigged from the start. Don't get me wrong. It hurts. There's a part of me that still loves my parents, that misses the idea of a close-knit family. I find myself wondering about my future niece or nephew, feeling a pang of sadness that I might never get to know them. But then I remind myself of all the years of manipulation, of always feeling second best, and I know I've made the right choice. My wife and I have been talking a lot about family, what it means, how we want to define it for ourselves. We've decided that when we have children, we'll create the kind of loving, supportive environment that I always wished for growing up. We'll celebrate each child's uniqueness instead of pitting them against each other. We'll be present for the big moments and the small ones alike. As for my parents and sister, I'm not sure what the future holds. Part of me wants to leave the door open for reconciliation, but only if there are real, substantial changes. I can't go back to the way things were, pretending everything is fine while ignoring the underlying issues. They would need to acknowledge their behavior, take responsibility for their actions, and show a genuine desire to change. And honestly, I'm not sure they're capable of that. For now, I'm focusing on my new family, my wife, and the life we're building together. We're talking about starting our own holiday traditions, about creating a home filled with love and mutual respect. It's exciting and a little scary, but it feels right. To those who might be in a similar situation, wondering if they should stand up to toxic family members, I say this: it's not easy, but it's worth it. Your peace of mind, your self-respect, your happiness, these things are valuable. Don't sacrifice them for people who don't truly value you, even if those people are family. I'm not sure what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. I'm building a life on my own terms, with a partner who supports and values me. And that's worth more than any family approval. Thank you again, Reddit, for your support and advice. It's meant more than you know. I'll update again if there are any significant developments, but for now, I'm going to focus on enjoying my honeymoon and looking forward to the future. Update 2. It's been about 3 months since my last update, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their continued support and advice. Your words have been a source of strength during this challenging time. My wife and I returned from our honeymoon about 2.5 months ago. The transition back to real life was harder than we anticipated. While we were away, it was easy to push thoughts of my family to the back of my mind. But being home, surrounded by reminders of our life before the wedding drama, brought everything rushing back. About 2 weeks after our return, the first attempt at contact from my family came. It was a text from my dad. "Son, we miss you. Can we talk?" I showed the message to my wife, and we spent hours discussing how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue with the no-contact policy we'd established. But another part, a part I thought I'd buried, yearned for reconciliation. In the end, we decided to respond, but cautiously. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. My wife offered to come with me, but I decided to go alone for this first meeting. I needed to face my parents without any buffers. The day of the meeting, I was a bundle of nerves. As I walked into the cafe, I saw my parents already seated at a corner table. They looked older somehow, more tired. My mom's eyes were red-rimmed, and my dad's shoulders were slumped. As I sat down, an awkward silence fell over us. It was my mom who spoke first. "We've missed you so much," she said, her voice cracking. We know we made a terrible mistake." My dad nodded, adding, "We've had a lot of time to think about our actions, son. We realize now how unfair we've been to you, not just with the wedding, but for years." I listened as they poured out their hearts. They talked about how they'd always struggled with balancing attention between my sister and me, how they'd fallen into the trap of overcompensating for my sister's demanding nature. They admitted that they'd been blind to her manipulations, always making excuses for her behavior. "We thought we were being fair," my dad said, "but we see now that we were anything but. We let your sister dictate our family dynamics, and in doing so, we hurt you deeply. We're so sorry, son." I appreciated their apology, but years of pain and resentment don't disappear with a few words. "I hear you," I said, my voice steady, "and I appreciate your apology. But I need you to understand that this isn't something that can be fixed overnight. You chose to miss one of the most important days of my life. You prioritized my sister's wants over my needs, as you've done for years. That's not something I can just forget." They nodded, looking pained but understanding. We talked for hours. They told me about how they'd started seeing a family therapist, trying to understand their own behavior and how it had affected our family dynamics. They shared insights they'd gained about their parenting style and how it had contributed to the rivalry between my sister and me. As for my sister, they admitted that the baby shower hadn't gone as planned. Apparently, she'd spent most of the event complaining about me ruining her special day by getting married on the same date. Her behavior had opened their eyes to how self-centered she could be. "We've started setting boundaries with her," my dad explained. "It's not easy, and she's not taking it well, but we realize now that we've enabled her behavior for far too long." By the end of our meeting, I felt not healed, exactly, but maybe like healing was possible. I agreed to stay in touch with them, to take small steps towards rebuilding our relationship. We set up a schedule for weekly phone calls and monthly dinners, with the understanding that my wife would be included in these interactions. Now, about my sister. A week after my meeting with our parents, I received an email from her. The subject line read, "I'm sorry, I was skeptical, to say the least. After her nasty text during our honeymoon, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear anything she had to say. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the email. It was surprising." She wrote, "Brother, I owe you an apology. A big one. I've been selfish, manipulative, and downright cruel to you for years. I always told myself that I was just playing the game, doing what I needed to do to get ahead. But I see now that I was just being a terrible sister and a worse human being. The truth is, I've always been jealous of you. You've always seemed so sure of yourself, so capable. You pursued your passions and built a life you love, while I shaped myself into what I thought our parents wanted. I resented you for your freedom, for your ability to be yourself and still be loved. I know this doesn't excuse my behavior. Nothing can excuse how I've treated you, especially around your wedding. I let my jealousy and resentment cloud my judgment, and I hurt you deeply in the process. I'm in therapy now, trying to work through my issues. I'm learning to take responsibility for my actions and to stop blaming others for my own shortcomings. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not sure I deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I'm truly, deeply sorry for everything. I hope that someday we might be able to have a relationship again. A real one this time, built on mutual respect and genuine love. Congratulations on your marriage. I hope you two are very happy together. Your sister." I read the email several times, trying to process my feelings. It was the most genuine thing I'd heard from my sister in years. I showed it to my wife, and we spent a long time discussing it. In the end, I decided to respond, but briefly. I thanked her for her apology and told her I appreciated her honesty. I explained that while I'm not ready for a relationship right now, I'm glad she's getting help and working on herself. I left the door open for future communication, but made it clear that it would be on my terms and that it would take time. So, that's where things stand now. I'm cautiously rebuilding my relationship with my parents. My sister and I are in a holding pattern, with the possibility of reconciliation somewhere down the line. My wife and I are stronger than ever, navigating these choppy family waters together. I'm not naive enough to think that everything is fixed. We have a long road ahead of us, full of difficult conversations and emotional hurdles. But for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about my family relationships. To those of you in similar situations, I want to say this: standing up for yourself is hard, but it can lead to positive change. It's okay to set boundaries, to demand respect, and to prioritize your own well-being. And it's also okay to be open to reconciliation if genuine effort is made to address the issues. Thank you all again for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and kind words have been invaluable. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I feel better equipped to face it now, thanks in large part to this community.